Okay, so we just looked at multiplying a monomial times a trinomial. Now we are going to multiply a binomial times a binomial. Remember, binomial means two terms. And so we're going to be looking at multiplying two terms times two terms. We're going to be looking at two different methods. The first one that we're going to look at is called the FOIL method. FOIL stands for, the F in FOIL stands for first terms, which means you multiply the first terms in your parentheses together. O stands for outer, which means you multiply the outer terms in the parentheses together. Inner, I stands for inner, so you multiply the inner terms together. And then last, or L stands for last, which means you multiply the last terms in the parentheses together. On your paper, you do have an example that's already done for you. But we're going to work on an example of our own. FOIL, F stands for first. You're going to multiply the first two terms together. The first terms in our parentheses are our x's. X is the first term in the first parentheses, and then the other x is the first term in the second parentheses. X times x is x squared. O stands for outer. That means that we are going to multiply the outer terms in our parentheses together, the outside terms. And the outside terms are x, which is all the way on one corner, and then 3, -3, which is all the way on the other corner. Those are our outside terms. X times -3 is -3x. I stands for inner. That means that we are going to multiply the terms that are inside our parentheses, that are on the inside part of our parentheses. In this case, 5 and x are on the inside of our parentheses. 5 times x is the same thing as 5x, so plus 5x. And then last means you're going to multiply the last terms in your parentheses together. The last term in the first parentheses is 5, and the last term in the second parentheses is -3. 5 times -3 is -15. So I ended up with what I have written down, x squared minus 3x plus 5x minus 15. Now all I have to do is combine my like terms, which are -3x and positive 5x. That gives me x squared, -3x plus 5x is positive 2x minus 15. And I end up with my solution. This is one way of multiplying binomials, but another way of multiplying is called the FOIL box method, which is essentially the same thing. It's just that it is a better way of organizing your work. Basically, it's very similar to the box that we used in the previous example. If you look at the first parentheses, you have x plus 4. That means that you have two terms inside that parentheses. That's going to mean that we are going to use two rows, one row for each one of those terms. One row for x, one row for -6. And then our other parentheses also has two terms. And again, because of the two terms, that means that we're going to use two columns for each term. So we ended up with a 2x2 box that looks like this. On one side we put one binomial, and on the other side we put another binomial. Let's do an example. Okay, so let's do an example of the FOIL box method. Our example is x plus 5 in parentheses times x minus 3 in parentheses. And basically the FOIL box method works by taking each term and assigning it either a row or a column. In this case, x plus 5 consists of two terms, and so I'm going to have to use one column for each term. I'm going to put x on one column and the positive 5 on the second column. Now for the second binomial multiplying x minus 3, I'm going to put the x in one row by itself and -3 in another row by itself. So I ended up with a 2x2 box. And now that I have everything where I want it to be, I'm going to go ahead and multiply. X times x is x squared. This x times this positive 5 gives me 5x. This x times this negative 3 gives me a negative 3x. And negative 3 times positive 5 gives me negative 15. And now I'm going to do what's called kind of like the peanut method, because I'm going to take the terms that are on an axis like this, a line that kind of goes sideways on a diagonal line like this, and I'm going to add those because those are like terms. 5x plus negative 3x is the same thing as saying 2x. So I ended up with x squared plus, I already added my x's together, so plus 2x minus 15 as my answer, which is the exact same thing that I ended up by doing the other method. You are welcome to use either method. You're welcome to use the FOIL method or the FOIL box method, but I strongly recommend using the FOIL box method because it is a very easy way to keep your work organized. Okay, so we're going to work out two more examples in your notes. On one column in your notes, you're going to be multiplying monomials times polynomials. And on the other side, you're going to be multiplying binomials times a binomial. So I'm going to do number 1 on the first column. I'm multiplying 4 times 3x squared plus 4x minus 8. Now, because this 4 is in front of the parentheses, I have to distribute it across the parentheses. 4 times 3 is 12, so that's 12x squared. 4 times 4x is the same thing as 16x. And then 4 times negative 8 is the same thing as negative 32. And I'm done. That's my answer. Easy. Let's do number 6 together. I'm multiplying the binomial d plus 2 times the binomial d plus 5. Now d plus 2, that's two terms. Each term requires a column by itself, so I'm going to put d on one column and the positive 2 in the other column. Then I'm multiplying that times d plus 5. Again, those are two more terms. So I'm going to put d, which is a term by itself, on one row, and the positive 5 by itself on the second row. Now, d times d is the same thing as d squared. I apologize for my handwriting. D times positive 2 is the same thing as 2d. D times positive 5 is the same thing as positive 5d. And then 5 times 2, to figure out what goes inside this box, I multiply the 5 times the 2. 5 times 2 is the same thing as 10. And I'm going to add up my like terms, which are the d's. 5d plus 2d is the exact same thing as 7d. Again, I apologize for my handwriting. So I ended up with d squared plus, when I already added up my d's, that's 7d, plus the last thing inside my square is a 10. And so my answer is d squared plus 7d plus 10. To figure out my answer, once I know what goes inside each one of the squares, I just add up all the 4 squares together. Okay, so now that I've shown you enough examples, all you're going to do is complete the rest of these notes, complete the rest of the examples, and then work on your assignment.